My name is Lonnie Bordloy-Pazich. I am Program Director at the Teagle Foundation for Institutional Initiatives. I am joined by Andrew Delbanco, the President of the Teagle Foundation, along with Melinda Zook and Roosevelt Montas. Melinda Zook is Professor of History at Purdue University. She is a specialist in early English history with a particular emphasis on the political thought, religion, and experience of women of that era. She has been instrumental in implementing the Cornerstone program that we're going to be talking about today. Roosevelt Montas is a senior lecturer in American Studies and English at Columbia University. He served as the director of the core curriculum for Columbia College for 10 years. And so he brings a deep experience with teaching with core texts, and he has led a number of workshops, institutes, professional development opportunities for faculty at a range of institutions in the US and abroad, 2-year and 4-year institutions, with how to teach effectively with core texts so that it reaches undergraduates of all backgrounds. My colleague Tamara Tweel is also joining us, and she'll be moderating the chat portion of our webinar. Tamara is Teagle's Program Director for Civic Initiatives. So I'm now turning over the webinar to Andrew Delbanco, our president. He's going to talk about the purpose of our gathering today and how the topic under discussion is a major funding priority for the Teagle Foundation.
Thanks very much, Lonnie, and welcome everybody. We appreciate your time. I won't take too much of it right now, just a quick word of welcome, with your indulgence, a somewhat personal word. As some of you may know, I spent many years as a full-time faculty member, which I suspect you will agree typically means spending a lot of time complaining, criticizing, or to use the technical term, kvetching, about the institution in which I worked. You might say it was a period of deconstructing activity. As a professor of literature and history, this meant in particular lamenting certain facts on which I suspect you will also agree, that students, often for understandable reasons, are fleeing in large numbers from humanities majors and humanities courses, that their writing skills tend to be weak, and their civic knowledge about what is a democracy, how it arose, and what is required to sustain it, even weaker. When I came to Teagle, thanks to the sharp eye of my colleague, from whom you just heard, Lonnie Bordloy-Pazich, the foundation had already identified and committed funds to a program that aimed in bold and fearless way to attack these problems. So the way I think about it is I got out of the deconstruction business, and thanks to the inspiring leader of that program, Professor Zook, from whom you'll be hearing shortly, we joined together in an exciting construction project. What she and her colleagues are building is a new curriculum based on certain premises that I think, again, we are likely to agree about. That is, first, that colleges have a responsibility not just to impart technical skills, but to open the minds and hearts of their students to the range of human experience, and thereby help them become imaginative and empathetic members of society. Second, that the humanities, led by literature, philosophy, and history, have a central role to play in reaching that goal, because certain books, transformative texts, as Melinda calls them, are most likely to help students grapple with the big questions that are on their minds, even if they're not quite articulate to themselves about having those questions on their minds. Third, that introductory courses should be places filled with the joy of discovery, rather than winnowing machines designed to get rid of the putatively unfit. And fourth, that all students deserve the opportunity for self-discovery under the guidance of a sympathetic and experienced and dedicated faculty mentor. So, Those are my opening generalizations for the conversation. Professor Zook will say much more and much more concretely than I've just said. I want to just conclude by saying what should be obvious, I hope. Teagle is very excited about the opportunity that she will describe, and we are committed to helping those of you who are interested in pursuing this opportunity to help it take root on your own campuses. We hope you will think about what you hear today, ask questions that are on your mind now or after the webinar. Look for other faculty on your campus who would like to commit to this kind of project. And we are eager to hear from you and hope to be helpful to as many of you as possible. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. And thank you, Lonnie. And as Lonnie said, I'm Melinda Zook, and I'm the director of Cornerstone Integrated Liberal Arts here at Purdue. And I hope today that what we've learned about building this program will help some of you. We've had some real success. We've seen our enrollments climb. We've stopped having to cancel low enrollment courses. We've re-energized our faculty, but most importantly, we see a difference in how students think about the liberal arts. I was talking to a Cornerstone student just yesterday, and what he said was so poignant, I have to share it with you. He said, "This program makes me feel whole, a whole human, not just, in his case, an engineer." So I want to begin today with a little history of the steps we took at Purdue. Our situation in the College of Liberal Arts was fairly dire not too long ago. We were losing so many majors in our departments that they were down by half their normal numbers, and particularly the traditional humanities, English, history, languages, philosophy, they were all hit the hardest. And I can tell you from experience, the experience of walking into a half-empty classroom or from seeing my colleagues' classes canceled, that this was an extremely demoralizing state of affairs. Now, it's bad enough to see your majors cut in half, but worse still was the fact that the College of Liberal Arts as a whole was teaching far fewer credit hours to students across the campus. So were we really providing students across our campus with a holistic education? And of course, the answer is no. In 2016, for example, among all Purdue students, only 10% graduated with a literature class. A mere 7% had enrolled in an American history course. So it's hard to imagine we were cultivating well-rounded graduates under such circumstances. Now, ironically, this fact was not lost on my colleagues in the STEM disciplines, because the first thing I did was go on a sort of listening tour around campus when I was building this program, talking to deans and administrators in engineering, science, management, and technology. And I would always ask the same question: how can we in the liberal arts help you better educate your students? And they never failed to say, our students can't communicate. They can't read critically, analyze, or document data. Their interpersonal skills are lacking. They are not reflective, nor do they have a broad understanding of the world. You know, well, surprise, surprise, right? How were STEM students expected to gain such abilities when technical degree programs were constantly adding requirements within their own college and abolishing electives, coursework in the liberal arts that allow students to discover themselves and the world and advance their communication skills? Nonetheless, I understood from the very beginning that simply creating liberal arts courses that might attract STEM students would never work by itself. We had to get students in the door in the first place and then offer them an incentive to continue taking liberal arts courses. So Cornerstone solves these problems by offering, one, attractive new gateway courses that fulfill basic gen ed requirements, and two, offering a certificate for students taking 3 more upper-level liberal arts courses in the program. What Cornerstone does is it brings students into the liberal arts and it gives them a pathway to fulfill their general education requirements rather than randomly picking unconnected courses. So let me start with how we developed the new first-year sequence for incoming students' transformative texts. And so that would be the next slide. First, we put together a team of 7 faculty members from various liberal arts programs. So Lonnie, can you change it to the next slide? There we go. And we offered these faculty members a stipend paid by the dean's office, and their role was to help me design this sequence. What we wanted is faculty to teach these courses, no graduate students, and we wanted these courses to fulfill written and oral communication requirements. Now, to make these basic level courses attractive to faculty, and in order to introduce students in the liberal arts, students around the campus to the liberal arts, we centered these courses on foundational works, readings from around the world that would inspire students. So we came up with a list of 200 authors, from Gilgamesh and Plato to Frederick Douglass and Toni Morrison. And in areas where my knowledge was lacking, I solicited advice from colleagues in Asian and African and Native American studies. Now the list of, it's a little over 200 authors, is a living document. And we mend it from time to time as colleagues offer new names. But it's also practical. A colleague may feel like Jacques Derrida must be on the list or the world will end. But remember that this list is for entering, say, aviation technology or construction management students. And our goal is to turn students on, not off, and try to teach texts that they will appreciate and remember the rest of their lives. I give the faculty latitude. At least half of their chosen readings must come from the list. And most of us choose all of our texts from the list, but faculty have also added all sorts of interesting readings, coming usually from their own discipline. And I ask faculty to require a wide variety of genres, not simply fiction or philosophical treatises, but plays, poetry, speeches, nonfiction, scientific writing, short story, etc. And we also encourage a lot of outside activities, field trips to concert halls, galleries, theaters, and museums. We schedule film fests, complete with pizza, a lot of pizza. Last fall, for example, 900 of our students read The Odyssey. They each received a free copy of the newest translation, and they went to see a theatrical performance of that epic. And the year before that, we did the same with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So faculty are free to design the course they want to teach so long as they follow a few simple rules and they teach the learning outcomes. They must teach written and oral communication. The readings are basically a backdrop to teaching those skills. What we created then, Transformative Texts, is alternative courses to the usual English composition and introductory speech courses that at Purdue were primarily taught by graduate students. Instead, in Cornerstone, full-time faculty, the philosopher, the musicologist, the sociologist, or the historian like myself teach these courses, developing their student skills while enriching their lives and inspiring them with a love of learning and all its related virtues, so empathy, perspective, wisdom, joy. Mentorship is also critical to these courses. First-year students have classes filled with graduate student instructors and adjuncts, but this is not true of Cornerstone. Their transformative text instructor is a full-time faculty member, ready to guide them, foster their interests, and continue to be a resource throughout their college career. These students need an adult in their lives. They need someone they can turn to. And I know that there's a mental health crisis at our universities and colleges. And every August at the orientation for all faculty in Cornerstone, I talk to them about how to handle students in crisis. And by the way, every semester there's more and more of these students in crisis, so this is critical. Now you might be asking, how in the world did I get the faculty to go along with this? Thanks to the Teagle Foundation, we provided faculty who joined Cornerstone with stipends for 1 semester. This is a 3K stipend, half of which comes from our college. Faculty attend workshops to prepare to teach transformative texts. And we run these workshops throughout the year, including a half-day retreat in August. Now, I always provide a meal. I always say that if you haven't gained 5 pounds after joining Cornerstone, you're not attending enough meetings. And the workshops foster collegiality. Cornerstone faculty learn from each other. It's the only place that, say, the anthropologist and the literature professor can talk about teaching, talk about students, about what works and what doesn't, and how to resolve the problems they're seeing. And I myself have learned so much from my colleagues over coffee and bagels. When the faculty praise Cornerstone, they always say the same things. They say it helped them become better teachers in all their courses. They enjoy the collegiality, and they enjoy the mission, the sense that you're saving the College of Liberal Arts and that you're a part of something bigger than just your department or self-promotion. And most importantly, pivoting faculty from their departmental courses to courses for undergraduates across the campus gives them access to students they might never have otherwise taught. They can attract these students into their other courses, or they can inspire them to double major or minor in their field. These courses recruit students. Most of the students in Transformative Texts are in engineering, computer science, technology, or business. This sequence, if it's taught right, is a student magnet, an onboard ramp to the liberal arts. Now, we encourage students in Transformative Texts, the first year sequence, to complete the Cornerstone certificate by taking 3 more courses in our 5 themes. So that's the next slide, Lonnie. So if you're looking at the slide, what you can see is that we designed these themes to attract STEM students. And these courses in each of the themes allows them to see their discipline through a wider lens. So there are numerous courses in each theme. They're all liberal arts courses, courses such as Global Green Politics from the Political Science Department, or the History of the Space Age from the History Department. And these courses encourage students to gain another competency, right, such as in environmentalism. But the most concrete benefit from 15 hours of coursework, liberal arts coursework, is the honing of their analytical and their creative thinking skills, along with the ability to read critically, write with clarity, and speak with confidence. And of course, they learn about the world and how the things they want to build or they want to animate might affect humanity. Now, the next question you might be thinking about is, how did we manage to get the rest of the university on board? We did a lot of outreach. I spend a lot of time, and I still do, talking to my new best friends in STEM and presenting to their faculty, advisors, and alumni, also employers, by the way. The dean of our Purdue Polytechnic Institute, that's our College of Technology, was equally concerned about his students, and he made the Cornerstone certificate a requirement for most of his degree programs. So that was huge for us. And I spent a lot of time over at the Polytechnic talking to the chairs of their departments and their academic advisors. And I can say that, you know, by the way, it hasn't been all wine and roses. I've faced blank stares and resistance and skepticism. But the fact that their dean wanted this to happen for his students was very powerful. And the visibility of the program as a whole, and the fact that our university president has been behind it from the beginning and has often talked about Cornerstone publicly, has really helped. And now let me say a few more words about buy-in. The Teagle Foundation grants allowed me to hold events on campus, informing administrators around the campus about what we were doing and why it matters. And this was critical because every degree program on campus, and there are 200 of them, had to change to allow students to take our new Gateway sequence. So every August, right before classes start, we invite the provosts, the deans, and other people instrumental in Purdue's higher administration, that's around 50 to 75 folks, to a formal dinner in which the dean, my dean, and I make brief remarks about Cornerstone developments. But mostly this is about a meet and greet. And what I do is I place my most articulate faculty supporters at each table so that they can talk to these administrators about the wonders of teaching transformative texts. Secondly, for the past 3 years, Cornerstone has invited every academic advisor across the campus, and there are 400 of those, to a brunch right before spring registration. And what we do is we put on a little show with either the faculty or some students talking about transformative texts. Now, this is critical because the academic advisors are your link, but to the students, and sometimes they take a little persuading. They're not always keen on new things, doing things a little bit different, and I know that that's a normal human reaction. But bringing them on board was critical, and we wanted them to know our story so they could articulate it to the students. Now, the other thing I do is I simply talk to the faculty teaching in Cornerstone a lot about talking to their students about why it's critical that they read these books, that they learn to communicate with clarity and precision, why they need to understand themselves better and the world, and why it will make them better engineers, better pharmacists, better construction management, or financiers, whatever it is they're doing. To read and to understand and to discuss, say, Locke or the Federalist Papers or bell hooks is not some obtuse academic exercise. It is absolutely crucial to their formation as human beings. So I always say this is not about some old-fashioned bygone stuff that makes no sense in, say, the age of artificial intelligence. What is Frankenstein about if not creating monsters? And I always say this, that this is not some old-fashioned bygone stuff that makes no sense in the age of political uncertainty, right after the State of the Union. What is to Tocqueville, if not about the success of representative democracy in America? To this end, I'm well aware of everything we're facing, the digital age, a divisive political culture, and the drawl, and especially the drawl of career-ready degree programs. We're competing with so much, but the fact is, and we have found this, the fact is these students need us now more than ever. They need a classroom with a caring adult, the slow professor, to riff off a book title, who asks them to read, to ponder, to discuss, and to open their eyes. And that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. I'm going to turn the webinar now to Roosevelt.
Thank you, Lonnie. And thank you, Melinda. What you say, Melinda, is beyond inspiring, and especially because what Cornerstone presents is it's a model. It's a model that can be taken to other institutions to really revitalize liberal arts education and to bring in students who probably don't come to college with liberal arts on their minds. And I think part of the challenge that we have as professors of liberal arts is to find a way to deliver a liberal education to students who don't come to college looking for a liberal education. And a key way to think about that is that a liberal education ought to be simply part of the standard package that every student gets. That is, our thinking needs to broaden beyond attracting more liberal arts majors. That's great, and the more liberal arts majors we can attract, the better. But we must recognize that the task before us is to bring liberal education to every student, to the STEM major, to the business major. The task is much broader than simply getting more majors. As Lonnie said in her introduction, I teach at Columbia, teaching the core curriculum at Columbia and in American Studies, and I ran the core curriculum at Columbia for a decade. So I'm deeply familiar with the administrative, curricular, ideological challenges of programs like this. So I thought I'd just say a few words about some of the lessons I've learned, some of the things I have seen from doing this type of work. Maybe first just describe the Columbia core curriculum. Unlike the Cornerstone approach, the Columbia core curriculum is not really replicable. That is, it is not practically replicable. It's a program that's been in place at Columbia for 100 years now. It's been the center of the undergraduate experience at Columbia. It's called the core curriculum, the Columbia core, and it consists of 5 courses in important works in the Western tradition. It is required of every undergraduate at Columbia, and that's one of the things that is very hard to replicate today, to introduce a program that would be compulsory to all students. But at Columbia, every first year student, for example, takes literature humanities for the entire first year. And every second year student takes contemporary civilization for the entire second year. In each of these courses, students read and discuss roughly one important work each week, moving chronologically from antiquity to the present. The courses are taught in seminars of a maximum of 22 students, and all sections follow a common reading list. So the entire first and second year classes, respectively, are reading the same books at about the same time throughout the entire year. We also have one semester courses in art and music that follow the same logic, and a required interdisciplinary but common science course for first years as well. This is Columbia's approach to general education: a common, required, important works-based, sometimes called great books, although that moniker doesn't quite fit, but an important works, transformative text-based experience of liberal education for every undergraduate in common. And of course, general education is that portion of the undergraduate curriculum that lies outside the major, and which is required of all students. So even at institutions that are STEM-oriented, the undergraduate degree has preserved this space, this territory that is for general education. And whether it's organized as distribution requirements, and most places organize their general education as distribution requirements, or as a common set of courses like Columbia, that is the lane. The general education portion of the degree is the lane in which we address what continues to be a central aspect of what a student should get in college. That is, not only job skills, but a broader sense of themselves and of the world they live in. Again, this is why Cornerstone is such an opportunity. It's so impressive because it is aimed at using this general education portion of the curriculum to introduce students who are not going to be liberal arts majors, who are at least not intending to be, into a real experience of liberal learning and the sort of education that college should concern itself with beyond technical knowledge, because technical knowledge alone does not constitute an education. And we shirk an important aspect of our responsibility and an important opportunity if we don't take seriously the task of educating all of our students liberally. And educating students liberally means more than asking them to take courses in various disciplines outside their major. I think we have kind of gone the easy route and simply had students take 5 or 6 courses outside their major and call that either liberal education or general education. It is really neither. So I want to say a word in particular about the value of a curriculum that, like Cornerstone and the Cornerstone and the Columbia program, introduces students to the literary and philosophical past that underlies our contemporary culture. One basic point to stress is that liberal arts education based on the study of texts of major historical and cultural significance is critical to the project of inclusion and diversity to which we are committed. I often encounter the superficially appealing idea that in order to foster diversity and inclusion, our curricula should move away from the study of canonical texts. I think that is a fundamentally misguided way of thinking. Introducing students to important works from our literary and philosophical past serves a key democratizing function. It sharpens their understanding of how the world has come to be what it is, and it gives them the tools and the historical awareness necessary for effective intervention in it. They're not accessible to the students, and whenever I hear that argument, I think of George Bush's old phrase of the soft bigotry of low expectations. And I also think of Frederick Douglass, who, as a slave boy in Baltimore, hears his master forbid his wife, Douglas's mistress, from teaching him how to read. The Mr. Auld is his name, tells Mrs. Auld that it is unlawful as well as unsafe to teach a slave to read, that there would be no keeping him. It would forever unfit him to be a slave. And Douglass hears this and says that hearing that he discovered the pathway from slavery to freedom. And I think that this liberating function of education that is most relevant, most urgently needed by many of our disadvantaged students, many of our students who come from low-income backgrounds, students who come from underserved communities, often underrepresented communities, that the liberating power of liberal education needs to be at the forefront of how we practice that liberal education. I have a lot of experience teaching this text to not just students at Columbia, but students from in a program in the summer that brings high school students from low-income households who are the first ones in their families to hope to attend college. And the transformative power of the text works just as powerfully with them as it does with my Columbia College students. So very quickly, in my view, what makes the Cornerstone's model so powerful is this emphasis on transformative texts, putting students before texts that have a reputation for being able to illuminate our own humanity and to illuminate the world in which we live in. The emphasis on discussion, that these are small classes in which students get to know each other, get to know the faculty member, and get to have a direct contact with other people's experience of the world and of the fundamental questions that the text raise. The fact that there is a commonality, that the faculty agrees to some common vision of some of the texts that are conducive to this sort of education. And of course, that the emphasis is not on a discipline. They're not introductory courses to any disciplines, but broad introductions to liberal learning and to the life of the mind. So it's a very, very powerful model, and I hope that many of you consider seriously the ways in which can be adapted to your own institutions. Thank you.
Well, Roosevelt, thank you so much for that discussion. So the Teagle Foundation is looking to partner with institutions that are committed to ensuring that all college students, whatever their major, whatever their professional goals, whatever their background, are inspired by powerful works of literature and philosophy to lead more reflective lives. And in so doing, we hope to bring about a reinvigoration of liberal arts education. We believe that general education is a powerful opportunity to ensure that students receive this exposure at the very outset of their college education and carry it forward throughout their undergraduate experience, and of course in their life beyond college. David Reingold, who is the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at Purdue, has described Cornerstone as a core within the core strategy. And by that, what he means is attempting to construct a whole, for most institutions, attempting to construct a wholly new general education program is extremely daunting. But it is possible at Purdue and perhaps at other places to have a sort of core curriculum within the existing general education structure. This is one strategy for implementation. I'm sure there are many others. And whatever avenue you might choose to use to adapt and implement this model in your particular setting, we're very open to alternative approaches. But of course, it needs to work for your students, for your faculty, and for your institution's needs. With all that said, there are certain considerations that are top of mind for us. We, of course, are placing a heavy emphasis on transformative texts. We think of transformative texts as works that grapple with enduring questions. These are texts that spark students' curiosity about ideas, about human diversity, and they have intrinsic value in and of themselves, certainly, but they also serve as excellent vehicles to cultivate in students oral and written communication skills. And, you know, as Melinda talked about and as Roosevelt talked about, when they're part of students' gateway into higher education, they can provide students who today, for all the reasons we know, are, you know, typically in pre-professional degree programs like engineering, they're providing to students an introduction to the liberal arts and aesthetic inspiration of the arts that they're otherwise unlikely to encounter. And at a moment in their lives when they're very open to humanistic questions as part of their education. The second consideration for us is providing students with a clear pathway through general education that helps them link the liberal arts to their professional aspirations. Thematically organized clusters of liberal arts courses encourage students to explore connections between different disciplines and fields of learning, and it's a complement to the more technical course load that they're completing as part of their pre-professional degree programs. These liberal arts clusters can provide a purposeful path through general education that's an alternative to the typical distribution requirements that has become the norm in higher education. And they help students appreciate that technical problems cannot be solved exclusively through technical solutions that are divorced of social, cultural, economic, ethical dimensions. All of Teagle's grant making is focused on teaching and learning, and certainly this grant opportunity is no different. And so, of course, there's a crucial role for faculty leadership. The program model involves faculty in the liberal arts and in professional disciplines reconceiving together how students can get the most out of their general education experience and come to appreciate the liberal arts and its relevance to their professional aspirations. And, you know, the final point is thinking about how this model might be adapted in your particular setting in ways that are sustainable for the longer term. The grant can provide startup funds for faculty professional development, for faculty curriculum development support, other types of support, but ultimately the program needs to work in the post-grant period. It needs to work within your existing graduation requirements, with the relevant academic governance structures that you have. It needs to be delivered in a way that makes sense given the faculty expertise on campus and implications such as, you know, your teaching load policies. So we understand that all of that needs to be thought through so that this program can work within your setting, for your students, for your faculty. At the Teagle Foundation, we make two types of grants. We make both planning grants and implementation grants. I strongly encourage all of you to apply for a planning grant. We're very, very open to making planning grants. We make many planning grants every fiscal year. From our perspective, planning grants are a low-risk way to build momentum for change. The size of planning grants can vary. Typically, they're $25,000 over 6 to 12 months. At the higher end, they can be $50,000 over 6 to 12 months. For the larger planning grants, it's usually because it's a large institution, lots and lots of faculty need to be engaged in the work, lots of departments need to be engaged in the work, and or there's a pilot of a course or a program that's involved. When the planning grants, you know, there's flexibility in how they can be used, and, you know, we could talk about that during the Q&A if that's a question. You know, from our perspective, there are two ways to judge the success of a planning grant. One way is the institution brings together its faculty, they pilot a course, they pilot a program, and for whatever reason, they determine that, you know, this program is just not going to work for them. You know, from our perspective, realizing that at the outset, very early on with the low stakes planning grant, you know, I think that's a good thing to realize. And to learn from. Another way of judging the success of a planning grant is it helps solidify commitment to the program, it helps faculty come up with a clear plan of action, and it yields a strong implementation proposal for the foundation. Now, whether you're interested in a planning grant or an implementation grant, and only you would know, what's right for your institution. You would start off with what we call a concept paper. This is a short 3 to 5 page document that addresses the key questions that you see before you right now. So we want to, through the concept paper, we want to understand how your strategy is going to introduce students to transformative texts and provide a pathway through general education that links the liberal arts to students' professional aspirations. We want to understand how you're going to engage faculty in the process of developing curriculum that meets these goals, how it's going to be aligned with your institution's priorities, and take advantage of your existing institutional resources. We want to understand why you care about this, why now is a good time for you to embark on change. And of course, we want to understand how the substantive changes that would be supported with the grant would be sustained in the post-grant period. If we invite a planning grant proposal based on your concept paper, there will be lots of opportunities for feedback before the formal submission of your grant proposal to our board for their review. It's not a black box application process by any means. We really value collaborating with our grantees over the course of their projects. And at the proposal stage, that starts, it starts very early. We see that as, we believe that one way we can be good collaborators to you is to offer feedback on your proposal narrative, to offer feedback on the budget, to talk with you about the expectations of our board and the questions they might have about your grant request. We try to draw lessons learned from our work with other grantees funded projects. We try to suggest field experts, consultants that you might want to think about, conferences that you might want to check out. We try to do whatever we can to be helpful to you as early as possible at the outset of your projects. And of course, to be a source of support once the project is in motion. In terms of the deadline for submission, we strongly encourage you to submit concept papers for planning grants by March 9th. The reason why we recommend the March 9th deadline is because we see it as advantageous to you. It puts you in a position to potentially submit a planning grant proposal for our board's review when it meets in May, and to have the funds in hand by June to kick off a planning process as early as this summer. Now, March 9th may seem awfully close, but we encourage you to take the step and to submit a concept paper because it's the start of a dialogue with us about your hopes for liberal arts education, what you hope to accomplish with Teagle support. It puts us in conversation with one another, and it helps. Even if it turns out that your concept paper is not exactly, sort of ready for the next step, we can talk about ways we can shape your project so that it meets your needs as an institution and is aligned with our grant-making opportunity. If for some reason you just can't meet the March 9th concept paper deadline, that's okay. All of our concept papers are reviewed on a rolling basis. We can certainly be in touch over email about, your plans for submitting a concept paper. And I think, the message I want to make sure that it's coming through is that, we want to be in dialogue with you. We would love to see a concept paper for a planning grant by March 9th, but if not, we should still be in email communication. You'll see my email address at the end of this presentation, and my contact information is also available on our website, teagle.org. So here quickly, I just want to share a couple resources. The Cornerstone program has received quite a bit of press in outlets as diverse as the Washington Post and the Chronicle of Higher Education. And you'll get the links to these articles shortly once we distribute the slides and the webinar recording. So now I think we're at a good point for Q&A. Tamara, if you could help moderate this segment, we would all, I think, appreciate that.
Wonderful. Well, we have some questions that have been generated, but if anyone wants to add a question, just go down to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen and type it in. Anything we're not able to answer in our 10-minute Q&A section, we will reach out and try to answer for you. So just to begin, I think this is a question for really Andy, Roosevelt, and Melinda. So you can decide who's going to take it. Can we consider suites of archival collections to be transformative texts?
Well, it depends what's in the archive. But at least in my view, a transformative text raises fundamental questions and is rich and complex. There aren't firm limits as to what that is. It's much like the definition of a classic. It's a kind of loose definition that's not reducible to a strict formula. I certainly would not think that an archival repository is by definition excluded from being transformative. I imagine that by its nature, it would require very judicious selection and curating to really be useful in a classroom setting.
I guess I would just quickly say, I think it would be very interesting to create opportunities for students to work in an archive in connection with such a program, but I would go out on a limb and say that a truly transformative text that has already had a big impact on our culture and on the lives of individuals is probably not hidden in an archive. It's probably out there in a published form, and that's, I would think, the kind of text with which such a program would want to begin.
Okay, Melinda, I'm going to direct the next question to you. You mentioned that students are drawn to the humanities majors as a result of Cornerstone. Are you also finding that your colleagues in the STEM disciplines are articulating to their students about the relevance of the humanities and the STEM disciplines? So I think what A. Lind is asking here is, are professors persuaded, are STEM professors persuaded that there's value to the humanities after participating in Cornerstone?
But the answer is absolutely yes. They understood that from the very beginning, but would they alter their program in any way, shape, or form to include more liberal arts courses? And the answer was definitely no. So that's why Cornerstone is very, very, it fits into the narrowest degree program. Let's put it that way. That's why the transformative text sequence is built to take over the written and oral communication requirements, because that's 6 hours right then and there of their gen ed requirements. And then the rest of the courses and the themes are usually, most of them are in our core, our gen ed. As far as the STEM faculty go, they say wonderful things about Cornerstone, okay? I don't know if they're saying that to their students or not. I hope that they are. They say it to us. They're very happy with us.
Wonderful. Lonnie, I have 2 questions for you now. Does Teagle have an idea of how many planning grants they would like to award in this initial cycle? That would be part A. And then there's another question that came in. What would be the size of the implementation grant and over how many years?
Okay. Yeah, those are great questions. We don't have a predetermined number of the number of planning grants. I mean, again, you know, we're very open to making planning grants. It's something that we encourage all of you to consider. And so we don't necessarily, I mean, yes, there's of course, we have limits on our grant making capacity, but we don't have, you know, a sort of a strict cap. In terms of the size of our implementation grants, that varies. I mean, you know, the typical Teagle grant to a single institution, it's usually in the range of $200,000 over 24 to 36 months. But we have made grants as high as $300,000, $400,000 over 24 to 36 months. It depends on the scope of the work. It depends on, you know, how many players are going to be involved. You know, so the budget is shaped in part by the context.
Let me quickly chime in and say there are over 100 persons representing some large number of institutions participating in this webinar. If we got 100 exciting, passionate planning proposals to build something like Cornerstone on your campus, that would be something that I would regard as a good problem to have. And, we would not be daunted by that. We are committed to this, and we think there may be other funders who would be joining us if that's the problem we have, is too many people wanting to do this work.
Okay, next question. I understand and appreciate the need to build bridges across our campus community, but which group do you start with? Listening tour, faculty interests, or a two-strand approach? Can you walk us, the whole audience, through where do we begin?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Okay.
I hope.
Well, everything. I mean, I did everything at once. I mean, pretty much. I was walking across campus everywhere to every single college, and you know, emailing constantly to get into the door, by the way, and have these appointments with deans, with directors of undergraduate study, with whoever would talk to me. At the same time, I was working with the liberal arts faculty, so it's been ongoing for 3 years of all of these things all the time. And employers, I want to make that point too. Every chance I get to talk to employers, you know, big companies like GE, which employs a lot of our students, or Caterpillar, I talk to them about Cornerstone as part of the Purdue brand. So they'll understand when they see it on the transcripts of our students, what it means.
Wonderful. So this has come across in a few questions. It could seem that this program is aimed at R1 research or larger institutions. So how do you envision liberal arts colleges developing a project like Cornerstone? Or can you talk a little bit about how this could work in different kinds of institutions?
Who do you want to answer that?
You know, very quickly, yes, perhaps there's an implication that the large diffuse research university is the most likely candidate, but we are very open to proposals from smaller institutions as well. I think one of the phenomena of our time is that the difference between the temperament, if I could put it that way, of liberal arts colleges and big universities is getting smaller and smaller. And some of the same problems that Melinda described, of students checking off boxes in an incoherent general education program, certainly exist on the campuses of liberal arts colleges. And if the faculty there have the will to do something like this, we would be very open to it.
And let me just add that a lot of liberal arts colleges have been very interested in Cornerstone. And the planning grant that I got from the Teagle allowed me to hold a conference. And I invited everybody in Indiana and the Midwest to come along. And most of the people that came were from liberal arts colleges, and not, I really wanted people from University of Indiana, et cetera, the big one, Ohio State. But no, it was the folks from liberal arts colleges. And they said they took away a lot, especially the transformative text sequence.
Yeah, and I'll just add that some of the problems, some of the curricular problems that one thinks of apply most to research universities or large institutions. Incoherence, lack of pathways are really pervasive in liberal arts colleges as well. So this model of bringing a kind of a pathway of coherence and uniformity, and therefore rigor and interdisciplinary collaboration, I think is very, very much lacking in many liberal arts colleges curricula.
Yeah, and if I could add some thoughts on this. Liberal arts colleges are, like research universities, becoming institutions that are offering professional degree programs because that's what students are asking for. So it's not uncommon for business, for instance, to be the most popular major on what you would think is a traditional liberal arts college campus. And this program is very much meant to bridge the liberal arts to professional education, whether it's engineering, whether it's business, whether it's nursing. And so I think that there is a place for a program like this at any type of setting that cares about making sure that undergraduates are getting a cohesive, grounded undergraduate experience anchored in the liberal arts.
Wonderful. So there's some requests, Melinda, that you share your syllabi from the Cornerstone courses. And then this question, how do you respond to faculty?
Tamara,
Yes?
sorry, if I could just interject. So Melinda, certainly, I hope you distribute your syllabi far and wide, but they are available on the Teagle Foundation website. On the slide deck that you'll all receive via email, this first link that you see right here, Teagle's profile in the Cornerstone program, if you click on that link and you read our short profile, you will see links to the Transformative Text 1 and 2 syllabi.
Wonderful. That's great. I think this would be one for Roosevelt, really, because I think he must have done this quite a bit as dean of the core curriculum. How do you respond to faculty who argue that expertise is needed to teach such a transformative text like the Odyssey, that you need to be a classicist to teach Homer?
I would respond that expertise is definitely needed, but not expertise in ancient Greece or in classics as a discipline. The basic orientation of a general education program is to make text accessible to a general audience. And a faculty member can be, even who's not a specialist in the field, can be trained to perform that job. If we give up on the idea of a generalist teaching general education, then we are doomed to merely teaching specialized subfields. So the very spirit of general education demands a kind of generalist approach, and any faculty member can be trained. It does require training, it does require skill, it does require a kind of flexibility of mind and agility in the classroom, but those are all the skills of pedagogy, not the scholarly depth that would be required of a disciplinary course.
If I could just quickly add, as someone who did once teach in the Columbia Core, it's quite natural for faculty who are asked to teach outside their specialty to be nervous about it. For that reason, one of the valuable features of the Cornerstone program, and one of the activities toward which Teagle funds were directed, as Melinda explained, are regular meetings of the Cornerstone faculty who support one another and give each other suggestions and model how to teach certain texts, and presumably also have informal conversations over coffee outside the formal structure. So one of the benefits of a program like this is to get faculty talking to one another about a common enterprise, namely undergraduate education, which is something, particularly in larger institutions, that faculty rarely talk about outside their own department.
And let me just add that there are a lot of syllabi because there's 60 faculty in the program, and they can design their own syllabi so long as they use at least 50% of their text from the list. So there's a wide range of literature being used. 900 students read the Odyssey last fall because we knew we were bringing the theatrical production to town. So we asked faculty, do you want to teach it? And many of them did, right? But others that didn't feel comfortable with it opted out.
Wonderful. So we're hitting towards our time. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we will review all the questions in this document and make sure to get back to you. So there's been a...
Mara, could I just say, we are getting toward our time, and we understand that many of you may need to sign off from, but I, for one, and I think the rest of us, we're prepared to stay a bit longer so that we can field some more questions. And as Tamara said earlier, if we can't get to you now, we're happy to respond outside the webinar. Thanks.
So I think there's a series of questions about whether or not Cornerstone can be integrated into courses that already exist. So I was wondering if you could talk about how that model might work. And then I would say there's another series of questions about co-teaching Cornerstone. How can faculty do this in tandem?
Okay, all right. So the first question is easier than the second. The only thing that's really new about Cornerstone in many respects is the transformative text sequence. The other courses that are in the themes, for the most part, were already on the books, and all I did was put them into these 5 buckets. And I'll be quite honest about that. The only other new course that we invented for Cornerstone was a constitutional law course that we're now teaching. The transformative text sequence, that has really taken up the resources and the time to build. And I hope that answers, for the most part, that question. Is that correct? Except for now let me get to the co-teaching. Do you mean two faculty members teaching the same course? Is that what? Okay.
Yes. Different disciplines to complement.
Yeah, well, we did experiment with that a little bit at the beginning, but it was very difficult to do. It was difficult because of how you pay a faculty member, right? Are they teaching a half course, right? When they have a 2-2 load, how do you count that as part of their teaching schedule? Do you have the class running at the same time? We ran into a lot of issues. We have done it, but I wouldn't say that it, and I'm willing to try again, but it was problematic.
There's also a related question. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, if I could just quickly comment on the question specifically about co-teaching. You know, I think this goes back to the point that we were making earlier about the importance of thinking about the sustainability of the program model so that it works within your institutions. You know, co-teaching, there are very few places that can literally pay to do that on a regular, ongoing basis. It's something that we discourage in our grants unless there's a strong commitment to follow up on that in the post-grant period. And so, you know, what are creative ways that you can bring together faculty, share your expertise, and construct a program that faculty members feel prepared to deliver within, you know, sort of your typical teaching load expectations? You know, I think that's important to keep at the forefront.
There's also a question about contingent faculty. So Jonathan Wilson asks, contingent faculty often have extensive experience working mostly or entirely with students outside their humanities disciplines, since they tend to teach departments' intro and survey courses. Is there any role for contingent faculty members to play in supporting the implementation of a Cornerstone program?
Absolutely, yes, actually. And many of these faculty have turned out to be our best teachers. When we started Cornerstone, it just happened that a liberal arts college very close by closed, just shut its doors. All those faculty were let off. We hired 3 of them to teach transformative texts. And they've turned out to be our best teachers in many respects because they had a lot of experience teaching humanities courses at their liberal arts college. We also have a few continuing lectures, but for the most part, we use tenure track faculty in transformative text, teaching transformative text. And in fact, now all tenure track faculty hired in the liberal arts half of their teaching must be in Cornerstone.
Lonnie, this is a question for you. Are libraries encouraged, welcome to submit concept papers, provided the projects involve faculty?
We're certainly open. This is, you know, I think it depends on the nature of the project. It would need to be clear how this would reshape the general education experience for your undergraduates.
And then, Melinda, have you had issues with scheduling Cornerstone classes? Are the students in cohorts? Is there block scheduling for these students? And then what percentage of your student population are actually participating in Cornerstone classes?
Okay, there's about 8,000 entering Purdue students every fall. And at this point, this year, we taught 3,600 in transformative text. So we'd like that number to go up to eventually 2,000. So that's how many enter the program in the fall. What was the other part of the question? Scheduling. No.
Scheduling.
Actually, no, we haven't had any problems with that. No, we haven't had any scheduling problems.
All right, I'm going to ask one final question then. From Lynn Botello, I can imagine resistance from the English faculty, as the transformative text classes are also taught now by non-English faculty. Is there a silver bullet to bringing them around to this program?
The literature faculty in our department are on board and teaching in the program, not a problem. Was there a little resistance by the faculty that teach graduate students to teach the English composition courses? Yes, a little, but I think that over time they're coming on board with what we're doing. So yes, it existed, but we've been dealing with it.
And are they involved in training the other faculty, or is that part of the process?
Some of them are.
And I would add that Columbia has a now going on 100 years experience of teaching these type of courses with faculty coming in from all departments. There is a lot of skill, even in literary analysis, that's outside the English department. There are other national literatures, of course, and other disciplines that focus on close reading and textual analysis. Also, the kind of teaching that one does is not it's not disciplinary. So even though you do close reading, even though you do pay close attention to the text, you're not training people for graduate studies in literature, even for advanced studies in English. So it's a slightly different project that we're engaged with, and certainly one that can be done capably by people who don't have training in literature.
If I could take a quick crack at that on a sort of speculative level, I understand where the question is coming from, and yes, some English faculty probably are resistant, but the reality is that English and other similar departments are shrinking radically around the country and losing students. The place to revitalize literary studies is in general education. So literature faculty, I think, are recognizing that the general education space is the place to reach students who may never show up again in your department, and also to recruit students who may come and take your courses, if not major in your field. If one other point, if I may, on this general theme, this is a sort of longer term issue, I suppose, but one of the remarkable things that has happened at Purdue, if I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Melinda, is that the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts has stipulated that all new faculty hires must teach a portion of their teaching allotment in the Cornerstone program going forward. And this might seem coercive, it might seem disadvantageous given the competitive marketplace, but the reality is that English departments, history departments, philosophy departments are not briskly hiring new faculty these days. So the future of PhD students who aspire to be faculty in colleges and universities, in my view, lies at least partly in general education programs.
And let me add, when the dean stipulated that, I think that some of the departments thought, oh, this will mean that we're not competitive. But absolutely the opposite happened. And I interview these candidates, and they are so excited about teaching transformative texts and being able to have all these students from across the campus in their course. This has actually helped us, make us look attractive. And one other point, we have a postdoc program. So we are also teaching recently minted PhDs from around the country how to teach transformative texts.
So my takeaway is that if you, that is, participants in this webinar, choose to go forward with something like this, you would not only be serving the students on your campus and the faculty on your campus, but also the aspiring future faculty. Because by building programs of this sort, you would be creating a lifeline for humanistic scholar teachers for the future. And I believe that that's going to be proven to be true as we move forward with this project.
Well, thank you everyone for your interest and for your time. Here is our contact information. If you would like to submit a concept paper for a planning grant, please note that the deadline for priority consideration is March 9th, and those concept papers should be submitted to proposals@teagle.org. There's more information about our grant making process on our website, and you'll have access to all this information, our email addresses, the links, when the recording and the slides are emailed to you. Yeah.
Lonnie, at risk of my talking too much, if I may, just add one or two points that are really by way of emphasizing, underscoring things that have already been said. First of all, on the March 9th date, we don't regard that, as Lonnie said, as a hard deadline. We encourage you to try to meet that so that you can get off and running. But this is an open-ended solicitation that has no sunset clause on it. So we're interested in proposals that are thoughtful and well-considered, and we'll look at them at any time. Secondly, what Lonnie said at the outset, I want to underscore, the practice of the Teagle Foundation is to work collaboratively with prospective grantees. That is, we are not interested in, it's not a test. Can you submit a perfect proposal over the transom? We're prepared to be in dialogue with you to try to develop a strong proposal. Thirdly, and this is looking into the future, we've been talking so far about initiatives on individual campuses, and that is, it seems to us, where things must begin. But we envision in the not too distant future, campuses that are doing this kind of work having opportunities to come together and share best practices, learn from one another, faculty to meet each other on different campuses, and we are thinking about ways to facilitate that down the road so that if you do undertake this kind of work, you won't feel lonely. And finally, I just want to underscore something that is implicit in what Melinda has said, but she's a modest person, so she doesn't say it as overtly as she might. This is not about force-feeding students something that we think is good for them, which is a problem that attaches to many of the old prescribed general education programs that had an air of, give them the castor oil because whether they like it or not, it's good for them. That's not the point here. The proof of the opposite, that this is actually the kind of college experience that students want, is that Melinda and her colleagues have thousands of first-year students lining up to take these courses when nobody is telling them that they have to. So this is a field of dreams, build it and they will come kind of project. We think this is what students want, and that colleges and universities have an obligation to provide it to them as an opportunity. So I'll stop with the sermon there, and thank you all very, very much for participating.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. They might want